Good afternoon, San Pacho's community. Welcome to our second San Pacho's Virtual Tech Talks. This is the first one in Section C. In this opportunity, we have an interesting topic that will be developed by our six speakers. The topic is modern slavery. The level of this talk will be B1, B2. I remind to all our audience that we will have enabled the chat to ask questions to our speakers at the end of all the presentations. The use of the chat will be only for asking questions. So let's start with our first speaker. She is Paula Cortez. She's going to talk about generalities about human trafficking and trade in organs. Paula is from the grade 9B. So please welcome Paula.
Okay, thank you, teacher. Hi everyone. Today I'm going to talk about human traffic in order that you learn a little more about these issues that many times are not considered. So I'm going to start. What is human traffic? Basically, it's an illegal trade in humans beings with the purpose of mental reproductive slavery, sexual exploitation, organ harvesting, and so on. There are many types of human traffic, but I'm going to mention them, the most common, and these are servanthood, forced begging, the illegal adoption of a person under 18, and trafficking organs. In this occasion, I'm going to talk about trade in organs, that is defined like a practice that involves the removal of human organs for commercial purposes, usually to perform transplants. But why does this type of human trafficking occur? It's for a simple reason, that is due to the inequality that is occurring in the world. Organ trafficking is also a big business because there are people who have the resources for that kind of thing. If there was no one to give this business, this would not be so popular. What it means, poor countries such as the Philippines, Egypt, Romania, Peru, Ecuador, and Colombia provide organs to patients in rich countries. Political prisoners, people living in extreme poverty, or political refuge are exploited as the main source of organs for patient tourism. But not only the material must be considered, in this case, the economy. Here, the principles and values that each one has also play an important role. And for finally, I want to tell you that the human being is unique and unrepeatable. When these practices are done, they are taken as an object of consumption. So their dignity is not valued by restricting their freedom and their autonomy. In addition, it is not morally or ethically correcting to degrade the human being in this way. The inequalities that already exist are fostered and it deprives the person of making his decision in front of his body. It is all. Thanks for your attention.
Okay, Paula, thank you for that excellent presentation in talking about the generalities that we have with human trafficking. That's very interesting for us to know this type of information. So now let's give the chance to Santiago Arcos. He's from the grade 10A, and Santiago is going to talk about trade in organs. He's going to be more specific with the information, talk about this interesting topic. So please, welcome to Santiago.
Hello everyone. Today I'm going to talk about the organ traffic, more specifically in Medellin, Colombia. Um, I have to say that everything is based on a testimony and my opinion. First of all, the guy that give this testimony is a guy that live all this injustice and do things that they didn't want to do. And that's why he want to do his testimony to because he wants that the kids of the poor neighborhoods have other childhood that different that he lived. As these deals once consist in the kidnapped children in most of the cases, And in most of the cases, the clients rape these children because give more money. Other things that they do is to give money to the families to be quiet and don't say anything about that. As we know, as we know, in most of the poor neighborhoods are people who need money. So dealers say, "Give me your child, and I give you, for example, 10 millions of pesos." And this family say yes because they need the money, and that happened with a lot of people, and also with police. Not everything, but everyone, but many police have to receive this money because they have monetary problems. And I think that it's so sad. And also is the reality that a lot of people have to live. And why anyone do anything is because these deals are so dangerous, and most of the people that say something can end in bad situations. Finally, I want to do a reflection that is that we have to spread this information to the most of the people because it's important that all of us know this information to change the situation that a lot of people live. Thank you.
Thank you, Santiago, for that interesting information about trade in organs. And yeah, it's that completely sad, the situation that in many cities people suffer from this. Also here in Medellin, Colombia, I mean, is one of the most important cities of the country, and we can evidence this type of behaviors on people. So thank you for that presentation. Now, let's give the chance to Maria Jose Diaz. Maria Jose, she's from the grade 9B, and she's going to talk about sexual exploitation. So please, welcome to Maria Jose.
Hello, I am Maria Jose and I'm going to talk about the sex trafficking. Sex trafficking is a crime when women, men, and or children are forcibly involved in commercial sex acts. The sex trafficking is the recruitment, transportation, transfer, handling, or receipt of persons who under threat, force, coercion, fraud, deception, or abuse of power are sexually exploited for the financial gain of another. Worldwide, false promises are ways in which the traffickers bait and enslave their victims, both adults and minors. The indigenous populations are those who live in object of poverty, are typically economically and politically marginalized, thus must lack rights and access to the basic services such as education, which makes them particularly vulnerable to the sex trafficking. Many times the most vulnerable people are offered false employment opportunities in the major cities. For example, men and boys are sent overseas to work in construction and agriculture, but are also forced to perform commercial sex acts. The women and the young girls may be offered jobs as models, nannies, waitresses, or dancers. Some traffickers can operate under the guise of agencies that can offer cross-country dating services. However, upon the arrival, these individuals are abused, threatened, and sold in the sex industry. Often, the traffickers keep the victims under their control by saying that they will be free after they pay their debt. The debt is supposedly incurred from the victim's recruitment, the transportation, upkeep, or even the recruit safe. Thus, the sex trafficking may occur between debt, bondage, or bond labor. The victims of the sex trafficking may eventually perform other functions in addition to being forced for sex workers.
And some traffickers use the sex trafficking victims to recruit or transport the other victims. And many of these victims are sold to these traffickers by their boyfriends, partners, husbands, parents, or other people they trust. The victims may suffer from something called a traumatic bonding, that is a psychological phenomenon in which the victim can experience positive feelings toward his or her captor. Why this happens? It happens because it is the perpetrator who meets the victim's basic needs, such as giving them food or a place to live, and offering them a sense of belonging to this place. The victims also may suffer from long-lasting physical and psychological trauma disease, such as HIV or AIDS, drug addiction, malnutrition, and in some occasions discrimination. Due to the internet, the supply and demand have increased because the traffickers or clients use the social networks and social media, dating sites, and online advertisements to market minors and victims of trafficking, in which they can lie about the age of the victim and even they can dress up the person in the advertisements. And when communicating with people uh, over the internet or on the electronic devices. Obviously, some websites try to filter ads for traffic. However, the high volume of ads make this process a daunting task and easier to buy the victims discreetly. Of the total victims acquired are boys and more than half are girls and women. In Colombia is the third country most affected by this crime in Latin America, positioning itself together with Mexico and Brazil as one of the nations with the highest number of victims who are exploited both inside the country and abroad. The main international destinations are Spain, the Dominican Republic, China, Japan, Chile, Ecuador, Mexico, Argentina, Panama, Paraguay, and the United Arab Emirates, according to the data from the United Organization. The sex trafficking is a market driven to criminal industry that is based on the principles of supply and demand. Therefore, people who purchase commercial sex increase the demand for the commercial sex industry and likewise provide a profit incentive for the traffickers who seek to maximize the profits by exploiting the trafficking victims. Therefore, the buyers of the techniques need to recognize their involvement in the driving demand by not buying sex and not participating in the commercial sex industry. And obviously, the community members can reduce the demand for the sex trafficking. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you, Maria Jose, for this presentation. And also, as you know, we are working in this virtuality, so we have to be careful with the platforms and the social media that we are using. I mean, with the people who are talking with, because we don't know who is behind the screen, and that is an excellent way just to avoid this type of situations. So thank you for that presentation, Maria Jose. Now, we are going to continue with David Ricaurte. He's from the grade 10B, and he's going to talk an interesting topic that is prostitution in some important cities of the world. In this case, he's going to talk about Paris and North Korea. So also, this presentation has some elements that are very interesting to pay attention because it's not like the common or typical prostitution in those places. So please, let's welcome to David Ricaurte.
Thank you, teacher. Good afternoon, San Pacho community. So let's get right into it. Around a month ago, Brut España has published a mini documentary about two transgender women who live in terrible conditions in Paris and have been prostitutes since age 13. So one of them is Argentinian and the other is Colombian. And they both have to go through terrible situations in the Bois de Boulogne, which is the park in where they work, including a situation where they had to see one of their workmates die in hands of terrible abusers and by fire guns. So in this documentary, it also shows all the abuses and sacrifices they have been through in this highly dangerous position and profession in this romantic city due to their sexual identity and how they sweated to get their money to survive. Both of them have been prostitutes since a very young age, including when they were boys. So since that moment, they have been trying to get money for their family since they've always been poor. And since the age of 13, they started consuming hormones to do the transition from boy to women, including their breast transplants. And so that's it for the Paris documentary, and now we're going to another situation that is even more deep. So recent reports by CNN have revealed that in the last few months in North Korea, several women, majors and minors, have been kidnapped, sold, raped, and tortured by their captors and their buyers, given the promise of having a better life and getting good money from this job. Some of these are doing this hard job by own will, while most of them have been forced to do these cruel acts. Despite this, they all have been suffering from being victims of cyber sex, being forced to get naked, and having sexual interactions online. Added to this, several of these women have had to stop eating a lot for prolonged spans of time in order to satisfy the buyer's desires. So this has been so bad that even some of these women that have been under this slavery in North Korea have tried to escape their captors and have tried to report to the police. Some of them have not made it successfully, but fortunately, two of them were able to report this to the police, and that's how we got this information, and hopefully the police from North Korea can do something about this situation and stop this sexual slavery chain in this country. That's it for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David, for that excellent presentation. And yeah, that's a little bit sad just to know that in this important city as Paris, this situation is very common. Is the daily situation that the transgender people live because they are threatened because of the other people that discriminate them because of their condition or their sexual relation, even for their profession in this case, because they don't have the support that they need. So thank you for that information. Now, we are going to continue these presentations with Valerie Calderon. She's from the grade 11B, and she's going to talk about how the government and different organizations help people who have suffered from slavery. So please welcome to Valerie.
Hello everyone, I'm Valerie Calderon from 11B, and today I'm going to talk about the human trafficking, but more specifically, the organizations that help victims. Based on the definition of human trafficking in people, including the United Nations Protocol to Prevent, Suppress, and Punish Trafficking in People, especially women and children, the human trafficking is an act of recruitment, transport, transfer, or reception of people resorting to the threat, use of force, or other forms of coercion, kidnapping, fraud, deception, abuse of power, or a situation of vulnerability, or the conception or receipt of benefits to obtain the consent of a person who has authority over another with the exploitation wills. Such exploitation includes any forms of sexual abuse, services or forced labor, slavery, or practices analogous to the slavery, servitude, or the organs removal. Because human trafficking operates in darkness, it is difficult to get exact number of victims, which ones may have memory loss, suicidal urge, show aggressive and unwillingness to interact with other people, as well as a feeling of hopelessness and a fear as a consequence of a psychological abuse to which traffickers subject them. Furthermore, they may have psychosomatic reactions due to the trauma. For example, the insomnia, palpitations, and diseases.
Wherever there is poverty, conflict, and gender inequality, women's and girls' lives are at risk of exploitation. Human trafficking is a heinous crime that shares lives, families, and dreams. Unfortunately, the human trafficking it is not exclusive for just one country. It is a social problematic but involves everyone. See, it is common for these criminal organizations to have movement in various countries, some where they have the victims and others where they have are taken. This in order to first avoid persecutions by the government and to have merchandise, foreign or exotic. Being an international social problem, various foundations, NGOs, governments, organizations, or some belonging to the United Nations system are involved in the prevention and assistance to victims. All this from the perspective of human rights, which ensure the abolition of slavery docked in the Magna Carta. When talking about helping victims, we do not just talk about the monetary or the protective aid. We must also integrate the psychological and the judicial aspect. A review of prevention actions by the Colombian state leads to show us they focused on the design and implementation of awareness campaigns or information to citizens about the risk of offer misleading, on the dangers of international migration, in search for a better future, and in the visibility of the different types of exploitation, such as we all have value, what we don't have is a price. Implemented in 2003 with the support of IOM, also with the purpose of looking these tools to promote the use of national free line against trafficking in people and provide through this medium clear information on the crime, becoming in turn an effective channel to identify and inform the citizenship on possible trafficking cases. The IOM, or International Organization for Migration Prevention United, is an intergovernmental organization associated with the United Nations that provides services and advices concerning migration to governments and migrants, including internally displaced people, refugees, and migrant workers. Also has implemented almost 500 counter-trafficking projects in 85 countries since 1994 and has provided assistance to over 15,000 people trafficked. The United Nations also participate more directly in combating these actions, for example, by the United Nations Global Initiative to Fight Human Trafficking, or UNGIFT, a multi-stakeholder initiative providing global access to expertise, knowledge, and innovate partnerships to combat human trafficking. Today, 167 countries are part of the protocol to prevent, suppress, and punish trafficking in people, especially women and children, which supplements the United Nations Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime. As examples of NGOs that focus on the prevention of human trafficking, we can find several with the international recognition, such as the Polaris Project or Stop the Traffic in the United States. But also we can find in our country, and it is Fundación Pasos Libres, a not-for-profit organization that seeks to revolutionize the way to prevent and disrupt human trafficking through the design, development, and implementation of innovative strategies, methodologies, and technologies to contribute to build more peaceful and just societies. As a conclusion, I want to highlight the job that all the organizations and the people who work in there and help the victims that result in both on the problematic mentioned above and the ones that I let it out, because they dedicate their lives to the purpose of trying to offer recovery to those that suffer this in help to go back to their own countries and families. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Valerie, for that explanation for this, for how the government and these organizations work in pro to just to save and rescue and also support people who have suffered from this type of slavery. That is an excellent action that they do for these human beings that have suffered this horrible situation. So thank you for comments about these ones. So just to end up these presentations, we have to Marisol Science. She's from the grade 11A. Marisol, she's going to talk about, this is like a reflection, I mean, because she's going to talk about how we as a members of a society can improve this situation, how according to the knowledge we have about this, and also according to the things or people that we can meet in one day in our lives, can solve this situation or just can help them. So please, let's welcome to Marisol Sáenz.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Today I'm going to talk about the importance of community, education, and language in the fight against human trafficking. When we talk about human trafficking stories, we tend to think about them as something that won't ever happen to us, as something that belongs on boring TV documentaries or sensationalist newspapers. In fact, it is so difficult for us to empathize with a situation that seems such distant and unknown that we are unable to relate with the survivors, which leads us to judge and blame them. But what if I told you that many survivors, just like us, thought that this would never happen to them, that when all began, they were normal students, families, tourists, workers, and furthermore, that a lot of them were drawn into trafficking and smuggling networks by their own relatives, friends, and partners. It is difficult to believe it, right? But according to a report from the UN, in about 46% of the cases, traffickers belong to the social circle of their victims. It is scary to realize that we could be the next ones. Besides, it is uncomfortable to get out of our bubble, but it is better to face it now that we can. There are some risk factors that make us more vulnerable to human trafficking. These are living in a country with weak laws related to human trafficking, gender equality, and inclusion, growing up in a culture that normalizes violence, having few or none community ties, experiencing domestic violence, living with any mental illness, and undergoing abuse. Traffickers usually take advantage of people's vulnerabilities and weaknesses to manipulate them. Some use a common method called grooming, which basically means to psychologically prepare someone to obey and subtly make them overlook destructive behaviors, using the trust and reliability previously created within the victim and the trafficker. When finally understands what is really going on, they are threatened and punished. Yet, you might be wondering, what can we do about it? Well, I will give you some advice. The first one, be aware of how human trafficking works. It is important to educate ourselves and the ones surrounding us about this issue. Second, focus on the risk factors. We are responsible for our communities and we must take care of each other. If you know someone who's going through tough times, don't hesitate in approaching, talking to them, offering your support, and always looking for professional help. Third, stop normalizing violence and its consequences. It is not okay to correct children using psychological, verbal, or physical violence. It is not okay to exclude people or leave them alone. It is not okay to bully anyone, and especially, it is not okay to witness all these things and do anything about it. Learn to identify when someone needs your support and act as soon as possible. Fourth, listen to the survivors and approach them with respect. Survivors are not victims anymore. They are strong, worthy of being heard, and visible. They have a lot to say to the world. Do not judge them and learn from their stories. And last but not least, be a citizen. Be aware of how to report this kind of situations to the authorities. There are several lifelines in which you can communicate with professionals to fight these crimes. Also, support initiatives and demand policies about human trafficking. Thanks for your attention.
Okay, Marisol, thank you for that reflection about how we as a society can act or can perform in front of these type of situations. So I want to remind to all our audience, remember that all of us can be part of the change, okay? So the idea is just be nice with other people because we don't know the struggle that they have in their lives or at home. So now I want to invite to all our audience to ask the questions. Here in the publications, I've seen that there are a lot of and interesting ones. So I want to invite for the others who haven't write any question to do it. This is the opportunity that all the questions can be solved. So till the moment, I am going to start asking several questions that appear here. So the idea is just to follow the order. Something that I want to remind to all our audience is that maybe it's not going to be possible just to solve all the questions, but the idea is that we have these doubts, these interrogative ones, because according to that, we are going to improve our job. So the first question goes to Santiago Arcos from the grade 10A. This question was asked by Sebastian Vasquez. So the question said, the deep web or a legal organization do this traffic of children. Why and how they do it? Why nowadays is easy to evidence this type of treatment in humans and also in organs through the deep web. So Santiago, would you like to answer this question?
Okay, this question is so interesting. And I think that the deep web is, as we know, is the dark side of the internet. And you can get all illegal things. And in this case, we are going to talk about the organs and the childs. So this works like with a seller and a buyer, yes. And the seller is, in most of the cases, is an anonymous person for the security of these people. And the buyer, I think that can be people who hasn't a lot of money, because an article of the ONU that calls organ traffic says that price of an organ is like 120,000 euros. That is a lot of money. So it works with a seller that is anonymous and a buyer that, in most of the cases, is a rich or the people that has a lot of money.
Okay, thank you, Santiago, for that answer. So the next one goes to Paula Cortez. So the question said, how is the process of organ trafficking and how does the government act in these kind of situations? So Paula, go ahead.
Okay. The process is that the person is going to extract the organ, drugs the other person, and leaving her totally unconscious. And when she wakes up, she finds a note informing her that organs has been removed, for example, the kidneys or liver, and you are advised to call the emergency department for a pickup. The governments internationally have been developing programs for for these types of situation. As clear example is the Palermo Protocol, which seeks to prevent, suppress, and punish trafficking in persons, especially women and children. These programs complements the United Nations Convention and the United Against Transnational Organized Crime.
Okay, thank you, Paula, for that interesting answer. So now I have another question, and this one is very good because it has like the general context of these talks. So this question goes to Marisol Science, and the question said, why do most of criminals perform in unknown families? Excuse me, I am going to repeat it. Why do most of criminals perform in unknown or low resources families all this type of modern slavery? So it means, I mean, why these predators attack the families with lack of resources or poor families in this case?
Okay, a family of resources are usually much more vulnerable to human trafficking because they have no opportunities and they are looking forward to get opportunities. So the traffickers usually take advantage of their vulnerability by offering them a job, usually good proposals, like interesting proposals in which they are interested and which they are going to, they basically can't say no because they have to survive. and that's basically the reason why they are more vulnerable. Thank you.
So thank you for that answer, Marisol. So we have a lot of questions, and now this one goes to David Ricaurte. The question was asked by Tomás Camilo Vargas. So the question said, what are the solutions of the government of North Korea in front of at this problem of slavery? So what is the possible solution from this government to stop this situation of slavery?
Okay, so as I said in the presentation, as soon as the as soon as the situation was reported to the police of North Korea, the police of this country and the different authorities have been trying to find a solution to this problem by tracking from the clues that the hints that they have from these two reporters, try to track these chains of slavery, and try to reach the core and stop these people from keeping doing that things, and detaining them and condemning them to certain time of jail.
Okay, thank you, David, for that excellent answer. So now this question goes to Valerie Calderon. The question said, what are the organizations that are present in Colombia for the human traffic? What are the organizations that are present in Colombia for the human traffic? I mean, for supporting these people who have been slaves of this type of organizations.
Okay. Normally here in Colombia, the principal actor that try to avoid is the Colombian state. For example, exists a lot of laws that first try to find the people that commit that crimes, and also the other ones that try to give some resources or advices to the victims. For example, provide a medical attention or psychological to provide protection, because most of the victims normally have that feel of horror to be persecuted by the traffickers, and also provide money to return to them home or food to provide a normal or stability life. Also exist NGOs, organizations that, the example that I give, Fundación Pasos Libres, that in the other hand try to educate the people to identify and fight against the human trafficking, since the education and the technology.
So thank you, Valerie, for that answer. Very interesting one. So now this question goes to Maria Jose Diaz. So Maria Jose, this question was asked by Giancarlo Polo. The question said, how would you eradicate this crime? I mean, the human trafficking and sexual exploitation. How could be a possible solution for this situation?
Okay, thank you. We can't, in a general way, like eradicate this problem, but we can try to decrease this problem with like situations or with some examples that are raise awareness among the citizens. Because, for example, in the last year, some Latin American countries have launched awareness campaigns that specifically target the populations most vulnerable to being victims of the trafficking. The citizens awareness campaigns are an important part of any strategy to combat the human trafficking, because the governments must incorporate a broader perspective in the prevention campaigns and focus not only raising awareness about how to identify the false jobs offers, but also about how to prevent the poverty and discrimination in each country. Another strategy is empower the strategic sectors. The governments and other groups across the continents have begun to realize the potential to empower strategic sectors to help to identify and report the human trafficking, and these sectors such as indigenous populations that are one of the most vulnerable. And another strategy can be support the traditional police like strength because they have law enforcement officers on how to recognize recognize the sex trafficking in various businesses such as alcohol stores and something like that. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria Jose, for that excellent answer. So this question goes to Valerie Calderon. The question is from Luisa Baron. So the question said, what measures have the most important organizations that protect human rights taken to prevent and combat human trafficking in the most affected countries? I am going to repeat the question. What measures have the most important of organizations that protect human rights taken to prevent and combat human trafficking in the most affected countries?
Okay. To avoid and prevent to have these kind of actions or crimes, normally the organizations try to prevent and help the people that are in poverty state because like me and my partners mentioned before, this is one of the most common spaces or environments that the human trafficking occurs. So they try to give assistance to the government and the people that are in this vulnerability situation. Also, with campaigns of prevention and to have or create conscious about the human trafficking, the normal situations, for example, the offers of jobs to go to another country to have better possibilities to obtain money and to provide the assistance that the government or the organizations can bring. For example, the normal or the common assistance that the police or the military sector can give to the population and the society to feel secure. And yeah, normally is that the education, the prevention, and support of the police, and the factor to try to combat the poverty and the violence environment.
Thank you, Valerie, for that answer. So I found a very good question. It was asked by Sara Varela. So this question goes to Marisol Science. So it says, from the point of view of education, how could a normalization of violence be avoided to prevent the new generations? I am going to repeat it. From the point of view of education, how could a normalization of violence can be avoided to prevent the new generations, to prevent this type of situations?
Okay, I think emotional education is the main point here, because if we learn how to use a more pacifist language, if we learn to act pacifist to solve conflicts around us, we can therefore learn to identify violence. So I guess that the best way in which we can educate ourselves and educate children since school is by giving them this subject and giving them the tools to identify when a behavior is being destructive, when a behavior is being violent. Thank you.
Thank you for that answer, Marisol. So, okay, I have a question that was asked by Maria Angelica Vasquez. It says, it's really important to understand that human trafficking is a big problem around the world. Can we eradicate these illegal acts if we teach and informate the people at schools? So let's give the chance to answer this question to Paula Cortez.
Okay, so I think that we don't can eradicate this problem because it's a big problem that we have in our society. But I think that we can like we can educate in a good way the generations, since school, since here the base of our life that is the yes our family, because we can make that the I don't know how I say it, that the values that exist are important, so we can make this situation more easily to affront, but we can't eradicate it.
So thank you, Paula. Yes, we have to educate a lot in order just to overcome these types of situations. So I found an interesting question that I want that David Ricaurte can solve it. So the question is from Natalia Delgado, and it says, if in a country like Colombia, where one of the only legal excuses to have an abortion is for rape, is abortion legal if a woman who was a victim of human trafficking and, and therefore was forced to prostitute herself where she didn't approve of having some kind of sexual relationship? Can she abort if she's one of the slaves of these sexual networks?
Well, we've seen a lot of cases in around the world that even if women were raped and are pregnant, the law for some reason doesn't let them abort because they need consent of both the father and the mother. And I think it's not correct, because if there is a proofs that this woman was abused somehow and was pregnant, not voluntarily but forced to, then this should be completely allowed. But sadly, in Colombia, we haven't seen a single case that it is permitted. So I think the solution is in the in the hands of the government, that they should implement this kind of solution for women, because in Colombia we have a high number of cases of abused women that are pregnant, and sadly they have to carry their children or their child for the whole life, even if they don't want it, because they were abused when they got pregnant. So this is something we should have a solution for, instead of keep having it like a problem and not being able to award.
Okay, thank you, David. And the last question goes to Santiago Arcos. It says, how would you eradicate this crime? I mean, the crime of trade in organs. What can be a possible solution planted by you?
Okay, I think that the solution is in all the society, because all the society have to give their help to this problem, and it depends in the thinking of each person. Um, I think that one solution that can help this problem in a long way is like educate the people with talks like we are doing in this occasion, and spread the information and the situations that a lot of people live to all the society. But yes, I think that this problem depends on the thinking of each person.
So thank you, Santiago. As you can see, we have a lot of questions that, as a matter of time, we cannot be solved. But we really appreciate that you participate and assist to this event, because the information presented by our six speakers is very interesting and can be very useful in a close or a far future. So it's really important that all of us as a community, as a teenagers as well, can or have some knowledge about this topic. So we really thank you for participating in this event, and see you in our next session. So we hope that you have an excellent rest of the day, and most importantly, take care so much. So bye bye and thank you so much.